Welcome to Childcare Conversations with Kate and Carrie.
Well, we are excited today. So today we are actually going to do one of two interviews of some authors of an upcoming book that comes out this week. And it's called From Oh Shit to I Got This. And I'm actually going to take today as an opportunity to interview my co-host, but also my co-author in that book and my cousin, for those of you who may have ever missed that. I'm going to interview Carrie Casey. And today we're going to talk specifically about an upcoming book you have. Tell me a little bit about the book and tell me a little bit about your background as an entrepreneur.
So we took a book that we wrote specifically for early childhood leaders, and we adapted it to make it much more for the general purpose manager or entrepreneur. And we wrote it with a female, I'm going to call him accidental business owner in mind. So that person who was like, "Ooh, I have this great idea. What if da 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 da?" And then they sell some to a couple of friends, and then all of a sudden people are like, "Ooh, we need more of that." And all of a sudden they have a business, and they thought they just had this little side hustle. So that's kind of who was in our minds as we wrote the book. That person who maybe it wasn't, they were 4 years old and they decided they were going to have a business when they grew up. It was instead somebody who, I now am a business owner. Okay, that's a lot. To try to take them from feeling, oh shit, what did I get myself into, to that confident feeling of, I've got this. And you can't find it spelled out, from oh shit, because publishers don't like it when you put that on there. So the I in shit is an asterisk. And
So,
Kate took the lead in the rewrite.
So Carrie, you have been an entrepreneur, and those who are listening to the podcast, obviously in childcare, but that's not your only entrepreneurial endeavor. So tell me a little bit about where you started being an entrepreneur, your first exposure, and then we'll get to some of the others.
So my first exposure was when I was about 6 months old. So I don't really remember it. But my mother started what she considers her first large scale business. I consider it her second real business. So she started a printing and copying company that became one of the industry leaders in that industry. Now we've got Kinko's and we've got all kinds of other places where you can print, and we have print on demand at your house with printers attached to your computer. But in the 70s, printing and copying required so much equipment that you had to outsource it. And so my mom started a printing and copying company in a college town because there was a lot of need for that. There were a lot of people doing their master's theses and their doctoral dissertations, and you have to print them. And a lot of professors needing materials printed for their classes, and the university press couldn't keep up with everything and they needed this. So that's what she did. So as an infant, I worked there. So that's my first one. And that company was where I grew up. From that 6 months until I was 12 years old, my mom started and grew that company to be a multi-site business in multiple cities. And so I just grew up around entrepreneurship and all of that. She has started and sold other companies before and after that, but that was the foundational thing for me, and that's Ginny's Copying Service, which still exists in a very different form and owned by somebody my mom didn't even train, but it still exists today. So that's where I started.
So if people have listened to our podcast before, they might have heard your childcare business story, where you knew as a very young child that this was a kind of business you wanted to own. But I know that there's this 7+ year break in there. Tell me about the break that's not the one that you had to basically go to middle school and that they wouldn't let you in childcare anymore, but you took this, oh shit, literally experience that happened mid 2000s. And I think a lot of people can relate to that kind of an oh shit story.
So, one of the things I did with money from selling businesses, and one of the things my mom did from selling businesses, is reinvest them in other businesses as a silent partner. And so one of those businesses that my mom invested in and then gave me part, I don't think I put any of my actual money in. I could be wrong. It was a long time ago, but was a real estate investment company where they were taking ranch land and scrub land and trying to turn it into a neighborhood. And it was all about social justice because this part of San Antonio hadn't had a new development in over 50 years. So there was a lot of social justice component, which is real important to my mom and I. And
so you mean you were a business owner with a purpose?
Yes, 100% with a purpose, because people who lived in that part of San Antonio deserved a new house. And if you went off and you did well, you should be able to buy a nice house near your parents, near your extended family. And there wasn't an opportunity for that. So families were being fractured. There was, anyway, a whole bunch of stuff. And we were just going to be silent partners. And then our first general partner turned out to be a crook. And, I don't have to worry about that being defamatory because we took him to court and the court found, yes, he's a crook. And they kicked him out of the partnership. And my mother and the other person who owned a lot of the company, became general partners. And again, I got to keep being a silent partner. I just got updates once a quarter. It was wonderful. And then that business partner, who was basically, not percentage-wise 50-50, but management 50-50 with my mom, died in his sleep one night, which caused a bit of a crisis.
Yeah, like that. How do you prepare for something like that?
Well, they didn't. There was no plan in place because there wasn't really a reason to think that this guy in his, I think, early 60s at that point was going to die in his sleep. Like, that's just not a thing that you expect of somebody that young. And he was very active and all of that. So it just wasn't a thought that they had. And what should have been in place was there should have been life insurance that the company had, where the company benefited to pay, the company was the beneficiary, so that if he passed away, there was money to hire someone to do some of the work that he'd been doing. That's what should have been in place. We never put that in place. And so what we did do, and what their plan had been, is that there were always two people who had institutional knowledge. So when Jim died, then it was just my mom, and she was back to working 60, 80, 100-hour weeks. And I'm like, no, first off, you're older than he was. And you had pre-existing medical conditions that made us concerned, even outside of the fact that you're older than this guy who literally just died in his sleep because of the stress of doing real estate in 2008. I don't know if people remember 2008. There was this problem with the housing industry. And so I stepped in as the second fiddle, so the second person to have institutional knowledge. And I learned about real estate kind of with a hose to, like a fire hose to the face, because I knew nothing about real estate. I'd never even bought a house. I'd bought schools, but I never bought a house. I didn't know anything about the residential market, knew nothing. And I had to learn all the government structures, and we had an HOA. I'd never lived in an HOA. We had to run the HOA. What is an HOA? Like, so many things that I knew nothing about, and my mother knew very little about, because she had been
So,
doing all of the finances.
so you said that you took this information in via, what did you say, fire hose? Love that imagery. What would be just one thing that you're like, oh, if I had known, or what was something you did to basically not drown?
It really has to do with something we talk about in the book and we talk about in all of our classes, which is immediately surrounding yourself with mentors, and we call it your dream team, right? They're not necessarily people who work for you. In a lot of cases, they're not people who work for you. They're people who understand the industry that can be your mentors, your partners, constituencies. So getting to know the residents in the neighborhood who were very involved in the neighborhood. Great. You're now on the HOA board. And our lawyer, who helped us set up all the legal, helped the crook, and then the deceased partner and my mom set up all of the legal entities. He became a huge resource. We could not have done what we did without David Earl. If you need a real estate lawyer in San Antonio, David Earl is who you need.
So do we
And
get to send him a bill for this? No, I'm just kidding. Shameless.
no, but I'll definitely send him the podcast episode. But, and Andrew Herrera and the senator and city council members and all of these people became an invaluable resource, because what we didn't know was monumental. There were so many things we did not know. And we didn't even know what we didn't know. We didn't even know what to go find out. But finding people who had a vested interest in the success of this business, which were the city council person representing that part of town, the state representative representing that part of town, the senator who was from San Antonio. Our bankers also were very helpful. All of those things, finding those people who care about the success of your business and going, hey, I'm drowning over here. Please send out some lifelines. And some of them sent out lifelines, and other people sent, like tiny floaties. Tiny floaties are helpful. If you get enough tiny floaties, you can make it through the rough waters.
So you're talking about creating this team. So do I have to have meetings with them? How do I use them? And do I have to actually know them?
Okay, so the first question, do you have to meet them? No, but if you want it to be a good relationship, you will go meet them in person. And you will go meet them in person with the, here is something I can do for you mentality. So say, for instance, the city council member, we would canvas for them. We would walk around the neighborhood talking to people about that person. We would host meetings or candidate forums where the two people running for the city council position could talk to the residents, because we had residents and we had availability of a school so that we could do it in the gym, the cafetorium, right? And things like that. So how could we offer some value to them before we asked for something back? The lawyer, it was very easy. We will continue to pay your bill if you keep us alive. But some of the other entities, it was a little harder to figure out, what is it that I can offer them as a struggling real estate development? What do I have to offer the senator? Not as much. So we put him on the board so he could show that he was involved in the community because he was on this board. Things like that. You do, just figuring out how you can help them in what they need before you ask them for help for what you need.
So you actually figured out how to handle your oh shit situation. So I'm going to have you jump forward to present day. Tell me, what is the status of this real estate development that started with a couple of unexpected oh shits?
They write me 5-figure checks every year.
So the development is successful.
The development is very successful. There's more than 1,000 people living there, probably closer to 2,000 people living there. There's 2 apartment complexes, an elementary school, a golf course, a park, a pool, something like 800 single family residences.
But what even happened to
and
that
a
whole
hike and
part
bike trail and a hike and bike trail.
And now their whole part of San Antonio has literally had kind of, I'm going to go with a resurgence, because you even have a university right next door now. Like,
yes, we have a university, A&M San Antonio. That's probably not how you say it. But that's right next door. And the person who was the dean of the education department had been the superintendent of the school district, and we had lots of support from him and to him. And so he's now one of the deans, or at least he was the last time I checked. And the all Toyota trucks that are built in the United States are built in that area of San Antonio. So a lot of those people live in that neighborhood. There's a street named after both of my, each of my children have a street named after them. One of them is very short. I was not in charge of putting where the names of the streets went. That is done by the city of San Antonio, but at least they each have a street named after them. And I love going by there every time I'm down in San Antonio, and just going by and seeing some of my old friends. That resident that I was like, great, you're now on the HOA board, is still living there, and he has 2 businesses, and he's continued to be on the HOA board. The person who I think of as my rental brother, who I worked hand in hand with for a long time, passed away relatively recently. Sorry. So, I mean, I go down there all the time, not all the time, but several times a year to see what I helped make, which is an amazing community with both starter homes and $1 million homes, so that you can have a community of people at different places in their life, and they work together and they play together and their kids go to school together.
Oh, I love that story. And I just love the concept of multi-ethnic, multi-generational community. What a wonderful thing. And I know that you've also been part of, companies that were franchises. You've also been part of companies that maybe weren't so successful. They don't have a, hey, we did it kind of a story. So when you think about your experience as an entrepreneur over the last several decades, we're going to go with more than 3, or involved in entrepreneurship, what might be something that you might tell somebody who might be listening to today's podcast, who's thinking about starting a business, maybe a side business to a childcare center, or maybe even thinking about starting a childcare center? What might be the first thing you would want to tell them to prep them for the endless possibilities of shits?
Build yourself a network of resources. Get a coach, get in good relationship with a lawyer, with a banker, with an accountant. Get yourself a group of people that are going to be your cheerleaders, that are going to be your advisors. That is the best thing you can do to insulate yourself from the crazy things that are going to happen. And I mean, before we did this podcast, we were brainstorming what are some of the, successes and failures. I have more failures than I can count over the years. And yes, having money in the bank helps you with insulating yourself from the the crazy situations. But the money in the bank is not as important as your resources, and the resources are the people that you know and the relationships you have. Do not be under financially resourced if you can possibly help it. But sometimes, I don't know, there's a global pandemic or a worldwide financial downturn based on the industry that you're working in. So, was part of childcare in 2020, and I was part of real estate in 2008. I don't have a great record for picking industries that are not affected by a worldwide event, but I made it through both of them because of the relationships I had. And the people who didn't make it through those are people who were going it by themselves and were financially under-resourced. If you've got the financial resources, you don't have to have people, but it's much better if you do.
Oh, Carrie, thank you so much for sharing your stories. If you are interested in more of Carrie's insights and oh shit stories, you need to go get the book From Oh Shit to I Got This. It comes out August 22nd. And we would love to hear any feedback you have. You can leave us a review on Amazon for the book, or Apple or Spotify if you are listening to the podcast. Reach out to us at Kate and Carrie at childcareconversations.com, and we will talk to y'all next week.
Thank you for listening to Childcare Conversations with Kate and Carrie. Want to learn more? Check out our website at texasdirector.org. And if you've learned anything today, leave us a comment below and share the show.